I printed the bank statement at 5:42 a.m. The screen still showed the last transaction, $6,980, to a luxury travel agency confirmation code, Mail 2025. Right under that charge was my name, my photo. I'd forgotten we still had a joint account, or maybe I wanted to forget. On the kitchen table, our old wedding photo lay face down, half covered in dust. It had slipped out of the drawer when I was looking for scissors last night. I didn't bother putting it back. Some things know when they're not needed anymore. 12 years married, 2 years separated. He never asked me to sign the divorce papers. Back then, I thought he still had hope. Now, I think he just had a plan. That charge to the Maldives. It came the same week I got an email from the bank. Secondary account holder, executed financial authority, dated April the 18th last year. Financial authority I signed when he said he needed help closing a loan for his second coffee shop. There was no second shop, but there was a honeymoon suite and a picture of him on the beach, with her. The worst part? My son had commented under it, "Dad looks so happy." I turned off the screen. I didn't cry this time. I made tea. I opened my spreadsheet. I looked at the assets that still had my name on them. Lexus 2021, condo downtown, 2 savings accounts. I didn't do anything, not yet. I just stared at the list like a woman who once stood behind a man and now stood in front of her own bank statement. I used to believe that even if we didn't love each other anymore, he'd at least respect the years. I was wrong, and if he thinks he can return from his little tropical wedding trip, and I'll still be here, quietly waiting. He clearly doesn't know what I've been preparing without asking anyone's permission for a long, long time. I didn't plan to check the mail that morning. I was halfway out the door, tea still warm in my hand, when I noticed a small white envelope poking out of the box marked "Final Notice." It was addressed to both of us. Inside was a notice about unpaid HOA fees for the downtown condo. Condo I wasn't living in. Condo they had been using. I didn't open it fully. Just enough to see the number, $3,142 past due. I stood there in my robe, gripping that envelope like it could explain something. Like maybe I'd missed something obvious. That's when the front door opened behind me. My son. "Mum?" He looked confused still in his gym clothes, earbuds hanging from his neck. "You okay?" I held the letter up. "Did your father ever tell you he was behind on the condo?" He shrugged. "No, why would he? He's got it under control. The Maldives trip was all covered." I said nothing, just looked at him. And in that moment, I realised he didn't know. He genuinely believed his father had earned that trip, paid for it, deserved it. "You saw the photos?" I asked. He nodded, smiling. "Yeah, Dad looks good, relaxed. First time I've seen him that way in years." I folded the notice and slid it into my sleeve. "You think he paid for all of it, didn't he?" I took a long breath. "No," I said quietly. "He didn't." He blinked. "Wait, what do you mean?" "Nothing," I said. "I'll explain later." I turned back inside, set my tea down, pulled out the drawer again, the same one the photo had fallen from. This time I didn't find the picture, but I did find something else, a copy of the financial authorization form, my signature, dated April 18th, and behind it, 2 check stubs, both cashed within 2 days of that signature. The dates lined up. I didn't feel rage, not yet. What I felt was the tiniest shift inside me, like a door I hadn't touched in years, just creaked open on its own. And I was starting to see what had always been there. I just never dared to look. I left the papers on the table, half covered by the morning mail, half exposed like they were waiting to be noticed. My son came back from the kitchen, holding a protein bar and a bottle of water. "You know," he said, not looking at me. "Dad mentioned something about refinancing last year, said you helped with some paperwork." I nodded. I did. Once. So? You knew about the account? I knew about an account. I didn't know he was using it to fund a wedding vacation with someone who wasn't me. His mouth opened, closed. He looked down at the table, saw the documents. What's all that? Receipts, I said. The kind that come after the honeymoon. He picked up one of the check stubs, flipped it over, his brow furrowed. That's your name. Both our names, actually. But, yes. I watched him, carefully. I could see it, something softening behind his eyes. A pause in the narrative he'd been handed. Mum, I didn't know. He told me everything was squared away. Said you were just dragging your feet about signing papers. I smiled, but not the happy kind. Is that what he said? He said you were bitter. No, I said. I was quiet. That's different. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he folded the paper slowly, like it suddenly mattered how it was handled. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have asked. I shook my head. You believed your father. That's not a crime. He stood there for a second longer, then tucked the stub into the envelope it came from, gently. If there's more I should know, he said. I want to. I reached across the table and tapped the edge of the folder with my nail. Then start here, I said. He nodded. And for the first time since the wedding photos had surfaced, he sat down. I waited until he left. He said he had a meeting. I said, go. He looked back once from the doorway, like he wanted to say something more. But he didn't. When the door shut, the house fell quiet in that old, familiar way, the kind of quiet that hums. I made another cup of tea. Not because I needed it, because it gave my hands something to do. I sat on the edge of the couch, mug in my lap, eyes on the closed curtains. I didn't open them. Not yet. In that stillness, things had a way of surfacing, like the moment 3 years ago when he'd asked me to sign the authorization form. We were at that Italian place we both liked. He still called it our spot, even after we were separated. He'd smiled across the table, reached into his jacket pocket. Just a formality, he'd said. You know how banks are. I trust you. And I'd signed. I hadn't asked a single question. That part stuck with me more than anything, the part where I didn't ask. I sipped my tea, lukewarm now. I'd lived so much of my life under the idea that silence was respect, that letting people move the way they wanted was love. But silence hadn't protected me. It hadn't stopped the transfer. And it sure as hell didn't buy me a seat on that plane to the Maldives. I set the mug down, reached for the stack of folders. My hand hovered for a moment, then pulled one free, the one marked Vehicle Titles. One small decision, one thing with my name on it. I didn't need a lawyer to tell me what was mine. I just needed a starting place. And that, I realised, had been sitting here all along, waiting for me to stop whispering and start moving. I drove to the storage unit just after 9, the one in his name, the one we used to share before the split, before he started locking things without telling me. I still had a copy of the key. He never changed the lock. The air inside was musty, thin with dust, stacked boxes, a filing cabinet. I went straight to the second drawer, third folder. He was always organised. That was his greatest weakness. Inside, I found a receipt. Not recent dated, 6 months ago, from a jeweller, custom engagement band, $4,120, paid in full with the joint account. I held the receipt like it might burn through my fingers, then I flipped it over. There was handwriting on the back. Don't forget. Tell Margaret the refinance paperwork is for the coffee shop. Margaret, me. He wrote himself a reminder to lie to me. That was the moment something snapped. Not loudly, but clean. I sat on a folding chair in the corner of the unit and read the note twice. My stomach didn't drop. My throat didn't tighten. What I felt was distance. Like I'd just stepped outside of something I didn't even realize I was still inside. The man I married wasn't careless. He was methodical. The same way he remembered birthdays and always left notes before a trip. He planned how to manipulate people, and he thought I'd never look. I folded the receipt and slid it into my purse. On the way out, I noticed a photo taped to the inside of one box flap. Us, smiling. Cabo, 2011. I didn't take it down. I just closed the box. And for the first time since all of this started, I knew exactly where this was going. I didn't go straight home. I pulled into the grocery store parking lot, turned off the car, and just sat there. I'd forgotten how heavy silence could feel when it carried history. There was a moment clear as glass now when I handed him more than just paperwork. It was about a year after we'd separated, but were still pretending we hadn't. He took me to dinner, not fancy, just that place with the bread I liked and the candles in mason jars. He brought flowers. He opened my car door. He laughed like he used to. And somewhere between the appetizer and the second glass of wine, he pulled out a manila envelope. Just some forms, he said. It's easier if the savings account is in both names, in case something happens to me. And like a fool, no. Like a wife still trying to believe a husband meant well, I signed. I even made a joke. You're not planning on disappearing, are you? He squeezed my hand, said, not unless I'm taking you with me. And now, here we were. He disappeared to a 5-star villa with someone else and left me with the bills and the memories. I pressed my palm against the steering wheel, breathing through the pressure in my chest. Not pain. Something colder, sharper, realization. This wasn't one mistake. It was a system, a pattern, one where he played charming, played soft, played harmless, and I played willing. I glanced at the small bag from the storage unit sitting on the passenger seat. The receipt was still inside. I reached for it, not to reread it, just to feel it. Paper cuts more than skin when it carries betrayal, and this one was sharp enough to slice through whatever loyalty I had left. I didn't speak for the rest of the day, not even to myself. I folded laundry. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I organised the spice cabinet and something I hadn't done in years. When my son texted to say he'd be late getting home, I just replied, okay. I didn't need to ask where he was. I already knew. Probably checking on his dad, making sure the trip back was smooth, making sure the lie still held. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked out the window, waiting for nothing in particular, and that's when it rose up. Not like a memory, not like a scream, more like a sentence, one I'd been carrying for too long. I let it happen. Not because I was weak, not because I didn't see it coming, but because I wanted to believe I was worth keeping, even if the only way to be kept was to be useful. I kept thinking, if I just stayed patient, if I stayed generous, if I kept signing things without making a fuss, maybe he'd remember the version of me from before, the one he called his good thing. But I was never his good thing. I was his cushion, his fallback, his safety net, the woman who would keep showing up even after he stopped pretending to deserve her. I closed my eyes and leaned back on the pillows. For the first time I let the sentence live. He didn't change. I just finally stopped waiting for the apology, and God help me. I wasn't even angry anymore, just done. I didn't call her. I showed up. Early Tuesday morning, with the folder tucked under my arm and the receipt carefully slipped into the front pocket. Her office hadn't changed. Same chipped coffee table, same bowl of butterscotch candies, same wall clock stuck at 11:17. Margaret Chen, she said when she saw me. Haven't heard that name in a while. It's been a while. You here for you or him? Me? She smiled then, but not with her mouth, with her eyes. Let's sit down. I handed her the receipt first, then the printouts, then the folder. She didn't ask questions at first. Just read. Her office was quiet except for the scratch of her pen on a legal pad. When she finally looked up, it wasn't with pity. It was with precision. He moved funds through the joint account? Yes. With your financial authorization? Also yes. And he bought a ring with it? Not for me. She tapped the receipt twice with her pen. You want to go after the assets or just protect what's left? I blinked. It wasn't a question I'd expected. What would you recommend? If it were me, she leaned back, I'd protect what's left and make damn sure he doesn't get a second chance to do it again. I nodded. Good, she said. We'll start with titles, then move on to liquid accounts. I assume you still have full authority. I do. Then he's going to come home to a very different picture than the one he left. I smiled, small but real. That's the idea. She slid the folder back to me. Start here. Sign where I've marked, then go clean house. I looked down at the pen in her hand blue ink, old, chewed on at the end. It reminded me of the kind I used to leave in the kitchen drawer. Simple, ordinary, but pointed. I signed the first page without hesitation. Not for him, for me. She called me that afternoon. I thought it might be a quick follow-up, something about paperwork or signatures I'd missed. But when I walked into her office, she didn't say a word. She just reached into her desk drawer and slid a thin manila envelope across the table. My name was written on the front, in his handwriting. I hadn't seen it in over 2 years. He left it here, she said. Said to hold on to it in case anything ever happened. Why are you giving it to me now? Because I read what's inside, and you need to see it. I sat down, hands steady, but heart not quite. I opened the flap and pulled out a single document, a revocation of ownership transfer for the Lexus dated 11 months ago, never filed. There was a sticky note still attached. Don't file unless she gets difficult. Difficult? I folded the paper slowly, like I was folding something heavier than pages. She waited. He was keeping control, I said. Always was, she replied. I slid the envelope back toward her. Can you file it? Absolutely. I looked around the room. Same butterscotch candies, same flickering lamp in the corner, but something had shifted. Not in the room, in me. For the first time since he left, I wasn't asking what I'd done wrong. I was seeing what he'd done right, to manipulate, to maintain power, and what I'd failed to do was look close enough. She handed me the pen again. One more line. I signed. And when she returned the envelope back across the table, this time with my name listed first, I took it. With both hands, quietly, but not gently. I didn't tell him I'd been to the lawyer again. Some truths needed a little time to settle before they were shared, but later that night, he got more than I could have explained anyway. I was in the living room, folding towels, when I heard his voice from the porch. Yeah, Dad, I'm home. Yeah, she's here. A pause. No, she's calm, like always. Another pause, longer. Then he said something that made my hands freeze mid-fold. Wait, what do you mean? The Lexus might be gone. I walked to the kitchen, careful not to make noise. The window above the sink was cracked just enough. His voice dropped lower. No, I didn't say anything to her. She hasn't said anything to me either. Then, what do you mean you had a backup title? When were you going to tell me that? Silence. No, Dad. No, that's not what this is about. Another silence, this one colder. Okay, yeah, I'll call you tomorrow. The screen door creaked as he came back in. He didn't see me standing by the fridge. Everything okay? I asked quietly. He looked startled. Yeah, just Dad being Dad. I gave him a long look. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, then leaned against the counter. Why didn't you tell me the car was in your name again? Would it have mattered? He didn't answer, just stared down at the cap he was twisting too tightly. He said it was just precaution, that you were being unpredictable. Unpredictable? I echoed. For protecting what's mine. His jaw shifted tight. He's not who I thought he was. I nodded. Neither was I. But we're both finding out, aren't we? He didn't look up, but he didn't walk away either. And that, for tonight, was enough. The next morning, I opened the drawer where we used to keep passports. I found 2 of mine, one expired, one still valid. His was missing. I didn't need to guess where it went. I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. I pulled out a yellow legal pad, sat at the table, and made a list. Not a list of complaints, not a list of what he'd taken, a list of what I still had. Title to the Lexus, primary on the condo loan, 2 savings accounts still active. Keys to the mailbox, I circled that last one. Mail told stories, always had. I heard the door behind me creak. My son stepped in, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Morning, he said. Morning. He glanced at the list but didn't ask. You heading out? Not yet. Just organising a few things. He leaned against the counter, arms folded. Dad texted me last night. I paused, then set the pen down. And? He's asking if I can help move some things back into the condo. Said it's still technically his. I raised an eyebrow. Technically? I didn't respond. He said. A small beat. He's pushing me to pick sides. And what did you decide? He shrugged. Still deciding. I nodded. That's fair. He looked down. It's weird. I always thought he was the planner. The one who handled everything. I smiled, just a little. He planned a lot. But sometimes planning and doing aren't the same thing. He didn't answer, but as he left the room, I watched him pause at the doorway, then glance back at the list. His eyes lingered on the line that read, mailbox key. Then he walked out. I picked the pen back up. I was done waiting. This time, the story would move because I moved it. I had exactly 4 days. That's what the email said. Property reassignment window closes 11:59 p.m. Friday. Today was Tuesday. I didn't panic. I printed the email, folded it neatly, slipped it inside a red file folder, the one I used to keep recipes in. Then I grabbed the mailbox key. The metal was still cold when I slipped it into the lock. 3 envelopes inside, all addressed to me, one from the bank, one from the insurance company, and one no return address. But I knew the handwriting. I opened the bank envelope first, a routine notice about account activity. $2,500 withdrawn on the Friday before their trip. Same branch he used to take me to. Then the insurance letter, coverage lapse warning, on the Lexus, which meant he'd stopped paying it. I stared at the paper, heart steady. This wasn't sabotage, and it was strategy. He was planning to let things quietly lapse, so I'd have to chase after them until I got tired and gave up. I'd seen him do it with contractors, tenants, even friends. Paper delay was his favourite weapon, but I had 4 days, and he didn't know I'd already signed the reassignment filings with my lawyer. The last envelope, his handwriting stayed unopened, not because I was afraid, because I didn't need to hear what he had to say. I already knew that letter would be full of softened language, guilt without apology. You misunderstood. We had an understanding. I thought we were still a team, and maybe once I would have read that and believed he meant it, but not now. Now I was counting backward. 4 days to file, 3 to notify the account manager, 2 to meet with the title office, 1 to disappear from the version of me he'd always depended on, the quiet one, the forgiving one, the one who stayed. This time, I wasn't staying. I was moving the pieces, before he even got back on the plane. I had lunch alone that Thursday. Same cafe we used to go to every other Sunday. The waitress still remembered me, still brought lemon in the water, no ice. I sat by the window facing the street, watching. Not for him, for the moment where I finally said the line I never thought I'd use. It was something he said to me the night he left. I'd asked him where he was going. He kissed me on the forehead and said, "I'm not leaving you. I'm just choosing myself this time." Back then, it shattered me. I thought it was bravery, him taking control of his happiness. Now, I see it for what it was. Permission. He gave himself permission to betray me, dressed up in self-love language, and I swallowed it. For years. Until today. I signed the final set of documents an hour before lunch. Everything that was mine was protected. Everything he thought he had access to was gone. The Lexus, the condo, the backup account, all closed, all clean. No spite, no fight, just structure, just silence he couldn't answer. The waitress brought my check. I looked up at her, smiled softly. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah. I'm just choosing myself this time." She smiled back. "Good," she said. "It's about time." I took my receipt, tucked it into the folder beside the Lexus title, and walked out of that place with nothing left to carry but my purse and the version of me he never saw coming. He got home on Saturday, a day early. I knew from the car service notification that hit my inbox. He still hadn't updated the email on his old Uber account. I didn't rush. I didn't even check the time. I just sat on the couch, sipping tea, waiting. The front door opened like it always had. No knock, no hesitation. He stepped in with a suitcase in one hand and a confused look on his face. "Where's the car?" I stood. Gone. Gone where? To a buyer. His mouth opened, but I kept going. "The condo's under my name now. Accounts are closed, titles reassigned, access revoked." He blinked. You can't just..." "Yes, I can." "Margaret, I thought..." "Don't," I said. "Don't turn this into something it's not. You made choices. I did too." He set the suitcase down, slowly. "You really sold the Lexus?" "I did." "That was our car." I raised an eyebrow. "The one you stopped paying insurance on? The one you planned to move back into without asking?" He said nothing. I walked past him, opened a drawer, and handed him a thin envelope. Inside, copies of all the filings, every title, every closure, signed, notarized, filed. "You'll find it's all clean," I said. "No tricks, no spite. You didn't have to do this. Actually, I did." He looked at the papers like they'd just swallowed him whole. "So, what now?" he asked. I smiled. "Now, you go." He hesitated, but only for a second. Then he picked up the suitcase, opened the door, and left. He didn't say anything when he came back in. Not right away. I was at the sink, rinsing a mug, the same one he used when he was little, blue ceramic. Small handle, a chip on the rim. I heard the front door open and close. No knock, no footsteps. Just the quiet sound of keys being set on the counter. When I turned around, he was standing there with the mail. "One for you," he said, holding out a thin envelope. Then he pulled something else from under his arm, a small cardboard box. I didn't recognize it at first. "What's that?" "Your wedding photo," he said. My breath caught. I found it in one of Dad's boxes, tucked behind the cleaning supplies. He set it down on the table, gently. The same photo that used to sit on the mantel, now scratched at the corner. He didn't push it toward me. He didn't say sorry. He just placed it there, then opened the fridge and grabbed a soda like it was any other Thursday. "You eating anything tonight?" he asked. "Maybe. I'll pick something up." That was all. No big speech. No dramatic music. Just my son, returning something I hadn't asked for. because he knew it mattered. I picked up the photo after he left the room. I didn't cry. I didn't put it back on the mantel either. I slipped it into the same red folder where I'd kept the titles, not as a memory, as a reminder. Not everything broken needs to be displayed. Some things just need to be handled with care, even when they're no longer framed. That night, I sat in the living room with no lights on, just the dim glow of the oven clock across the hall, blinking 9:46. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved. I was still. The kind of still that comes when the storm has passed and you realise you're still standing, just quieter now. I reached for the red folder beside me, the same one that had carried contracts, closures, filings. But tonight, it held the photo. I didn't open it. I just ran my hand across the surface, felt the outline through the cardboard. Not grief, not longing, memory. That's all it was now. I thought about the version of myself I used to be, the woman who smiled at that photo, who let silence pass for peace, who thought patience would fix what betrayal had already fractured. She tried. She really tried, and I don't resent her for it. But she's not the one who sold the Lexus. She's not the one who moved the money, filed the papers, and stared down the man who thought she'd stay small forever. That was me. This me. I heard the soft sound of my son laughing down the hall TV low, a plate clinking gently in the sink. Life hadn't fallen apart, it had just changed shape. And I was finally the one doing the shaping. I leaned back into the cushions, exhaled slow. I didn't need the last word. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him at all. And maybe that was the freedom I'd never known I was allowed to claim. The quiet felt different now. Not hollow, not tense, just spacious. I started putting things back where they belonged, not because I wanted to restore anything, but because a house without chaos needed rhythm. I folded throw blankets, wiped down baseboards, organised the pantry for the first time in years. I wasn't trying to forget. I was simply making room. A few days later, I went to the garden store, bought rosemary, thyme, and a stubborn little sage plant that had to be coaxed into its pot. I hadn't planted anything in years, not since before the separation. I knelt in the dirt, wearing gloves that still smelled faintly of rubber and dust. The sun was warm, but not punishing. A breeze passed by, and I closed my eyes just for a moment. My son stepped out onto the porch behind me. I heard the creak of the door, the shift in the floorboards. "Smells good out here," he said. I smiled without turning around. "Sage," I said. "It's stubborn, but it roots deep once it settles." He sat on the steps, elbows on his knees. "You okay?" "I am." He nodded, picked up the watering can beside him. "Want help?" I looked up. "Sure." He passed the can to me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look like a boy caught between parents. He just looked like my son. I pressed my palm against the soil, checking for dampness. "Feels right," I said softly. "The garden, all of it." And as I reached for the next seedling, I realised I didn't need a new chapter. I'd simply stopped rereading the one he left behind. We finished planting just before the sun dipped behind the fence. The yard smelled like rosemary and clean earth. My hands were streaked with soil and his shirt was damp from sweat, but neither of us seemed to care. I stood up slowly, knees stiff, and wiped my palms on my jeans. He handed me a glass of water without asking. "Thanks," I said. He nodded. We sat together on the porch steps, both staring at the garden we'd just made. "You know," he said after a while, "I kept trying to figure out who to believe." I didn't interrupt. "For a long time I thought Dad just had a harder way of showing love, like maybe he wasn't good at it, but he meant well." I took a sip of water, waited. "But then I realised something," he said. "You never made me choose. He looked over. You just stayed. Not loud, not angry, just steady. I smiled softly. That was the only way I knew how. He looked back at the sage plant. You said something earlier, he said, about how it was stubborn, but it roots deep once it settles. I nodded. That's you, he said quietly. That's always been you. I didn't speak. I just looked at him, this grown man who used to fit inside my arms, and realised that sometimes the best apology doesn't sound like I'm sorry. Sometimes it sounds like understanding, and that understanding doesn't have to be loud, just true. He reached down and brushed a bit of dirt from his shoe. Mum? Yeah? I think you were right. Silence isn't the same as peace. I smiled. That had been my line. Back in the kitchen, the first time he began to see me clearly. And now it was his, said without bitterness, said like a man who finally understood what it costs to stay quiet too long. I looked at the garden again, stubborn roots, deep soil, and the quiet promise that sometimes things really do grow back better. She was 7 and curious, that beautiful age when questions came fast and attention moved faster. Grandma, she said, climbing into the chair beside me, why do you have a plant named Sage? I smiled. Because it reminds me of someone strong, like you. I looked at her. Freckles, wild hair, feet too big for her frame, and smiled. Maybe, but mostly it reminds me to stay grounded. She wrinkled her nose. That sounds like something for grown-ups. I laughed. It kind of is. She looked around the garden like it held secrets. Mum says you used to be married to someone else before Grandpa Brian. I nodded slowly. I was. Did he hurt you? The question came out light, not invasive, just real. I reached over and opened the red folder I'd kept tucked under my chair. Inside was the photo, the one I hadn't thrown away. He did, I said softly, but not with his hands, with silence and with forgetting what mattered. She studied the picture. You look happy in this. I was, at the time. I pulled the photo from the folder and tucked it gently into a new envelope. Sometimes we keep things not because they're good, I said, but because they remind us of how far we've come. I sealed the envelope, wrote her name across the front. What's that for? She asked. A future reminder, I said. You'll open it when you're old enough. She tilted her head. Old like you. I laughed again, slower this time. Maybe not that old, just old enough to know that love without respect isn't love at all. She hugged me, tight arms around my waist, chin on my knee, and I looked out at the sage bush, full and stubborn and thriving. In that moment, I realised the things we let go of don't disappear. Sometimes they echo softly into the people who come after us, and sometimes that's enough. I didn't need anyone to say I'd done the right thing. I didn't need validation or praise or even understanding. I just needed quiet, the kind that lets a woman finally hear herself again. Some days, I still find little pieces of that old Life Bank statements I missed, a photo I forgot to put away, a drawer with his handwriting buried in a label. But they don't carry weight anymore. They don't have the power to freeze me, because I took that power back, slowly, quietly, one signature at a time. Maybe you know what that feels like. Not to yell, not to fight, just to reclaim. Maybe someone took something from you and thought you'd stay soft forever. Maybe they thought you'd forget how to stand. And maybe, just maybe, you're still deciding what to do with what's left. If so, what would happen if you stopped waiting for someone to do right by you and started doing right for you?